I am pleased to see all of you here. For this panel, we're going to be talking about the culture, socio-cultural for the Africas and its impact around the world. We have one panelist who could not make it. He's the executive for Trace TV. So we're going to play a video, and after the video, I'm going to call the other panelists to the stage. Thank you. Play the video, please.
Hello, my name is Olivier Laucher. I am the co-founder and executive chairman of Trace. Thank you for inviting me to this panel, Taking African Culture Global. In fact, the topic of your panel is exactly what Trace is about. And when we launched our first TV channel 15 years ago, we obviously tried to define the mission, the meaning, the purpose of the Trace brand. And we did it based on a very simple insight. African music and culture is underserved, underrepresented, undervalued on a global basis. And the creators, the lovers of African music and entertainment need to be represented, need to be engaged with the different stakeholders of this culture. And we decided that we will be, at Trace, the media, the brand, that will offer them the platform, both on digital, on television, on radio, on mobile, on event, on content, that will be the hub of this African music and culture. And we have tried also to define this mission into a manifesto on a short film that you are going to watch now.
We question everything. We move the needle. We hustle. We are DIY. You're bi-coastal. We're from Brooklyn, London, Lagos, Kingston. We're global by nature. We code switch for a living. We work in Atlanta skyscrapers, but our grandmothers bathed in rivers. Dialect is our first language. Job interview is our second. We're not just looking for jobs. We're looking for meaning. We spray paint. We spray money. We run things. We do the math. We learn from our mistakes. We start the party. We contain multitudes. We make taste. We knew Basquiat's genius before Jay-Z name-checked. We taught Beyonce to dance. We move on the Chris O'Feely Fetty Wap axis, the Neymar and Usain Bolt axis. We've partied with WizKid and tweet with Kanye. We are the media what David Ajayi is to architecture, what Serena Williams is to tennis, what Naomi Campbell is to supermodeling. We breakdance in Korea. We are simultaneously ancient and modern. We develop new styles based on old values. We're a new kind of conqueror. We take down fascist flags. We are a threat. We are people of style and power. We are woke. We are restless. Our soul is not for sale. Governments don't fully represent us. No brand or media or institution embraces us in our entirety. We animate and dominate everything we touch. Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Tumblr, sport, fashion, music, culture. We are the inevitable intersection of hip-hop and Afrobeat. We are separated by false divisions, but we cannot be contained. We are a legion. Our nation knows no borders. Our true nation is the diaspora. Our feed is the global drumbeat. We are Trace.
Awesome video, okay. I'm going to introduce panelists. First off, I'm going to start with, he needs no introduction. He's homegrown here, but he's also homegrown in back home in Ghana. Sir Ozwald Boateng. Round of applause. Yes. Sit down here.
I'm still waiting for the knighthood. I haven't quite got that
yet. Apologies. And crowned, sir, from crowned by the Queen, I believe, awarded by the Queen, Order of the British Empire. Please a round of applause for that. It's a very hard title to achieve. My apologies. Next up would be, he's been in the space for quite a long time, a very, very long time. I should call him Daddy, but I can't do that. I'll call him executive. A lot of us admire him. He has inner workings of the industry. He was a former manager for a fella at Nicola Kuti. He's been involved with Broadway, and he's close to the family, and he has some insights which I believe we can leverage during this session. So please put a round of applause for Mr. Rikki Stein.
You know, Ozwald, I knew I was going to be sitting next to you, so I went and bought a suit. You should have bought one for me, though.
Next up, we have, now he's no stranger to Nollywood and the music industry, not at all. We call him Mr. Capable in some parts. See, I told you, he needs no introduction. But we'll introduce him anyway as our very own Banky W. Now, everybody has a program, so if you want to see their full bios, you turn to page, I believe, page 21. It's right there. Last but not the least, we have a creative juggernaut in the field. Right there is fine, I guess. We have a creative juggernaut, music executive. He is leading the efforts for expanding Sony, which is an international brand, into the West African system. He's an expert in distribution, has insights on marketing and licensing, and I believe he has a lot to share with us today. His name is Michael Ugwu. Thank you. So the burning questions that we have today in the Africas, and I put an S after the Africas, like the Americas. We need to retell our own stories. So I say the Africas. Where the African culture is today on the global stage, music-wise, film-wise, fashion-wise, and how lucrative it is for new players in the space. We have an excellent panelist here who can talk more about that. What are the fundamental reasons behind what the growing dominance is in the space, in the African space, on the global stage, how we're perceived, and how investors and people are looking at the space as well? Now, another question is, what's required to sustain the African dominance on the global stage? What are the practical steps and solutions? Finally, what advice do we give to the young, budding entrepreneurs who have a lot of capital, but they have no guidance, mentorship, and those kind of things? So, and then we have the fashion, obviously, the fashion industry. I can't, not utilize the exposure of Sir Ozwald Boateng. Please give him a round of applause again, please. Order of the British Empire. Okay, first question I'm going to pose is to Sir Ozwald. With the establishment of African-centric brands, multinational-owned boutique and stores, they still drive profits and govern the way runway shows are to some extent. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so, can I have that question again?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
With the growing establishment of African-centric brands, it's still governed by multinationals. You have Hugo Boss, you have a certain brands in there. Like,
Okay,
yes.
got it. Right. So, well, that's quite interesting. It's really interesting because if you look at a lot of the big brands right now, be it Burberry recently or Marc Jacobs, their styling are very much African and black. I've been in the industry now for what, 30 years? 30 years, which is a long time. And I have never known the business to be so obviously influenced by black culture. And so that's a fantastic thing to experience. I mean, I have to keep talking about my experience because I remember being invited to fashion awards for decades and quite literally being the only black person in the room as a standard exercise. And I was invited to the fashion awards last year in, I think, December. And when I got into the room, to my absolute amazement, was like a third of the people that were black. I was like, what happened? I mean, this must have happened over the last five years. And so, and in all fields, all aspects, be it, you know, styling, makeup. I mean, it was just, so there's definitely being a huge shift in that impact of the culture. And then I think a catalyst to that has been social media and the fact that you can communicate whatever your vision is straight to the audience about having to go for what we call the magazines, which were there before, the gates, you know, that would determine a lot of things. And that's all changed. And it's quite interesting. I mean, I'm constantly, I mean, I was at the launch of the Vogue, you know, I've known Edward since he was 16 years old. And sorry, do you know who I'm talking about? The new editor? Good. Everyone in this room should know who that is. So he had a big dinner to celebrate his first issue of the magazine. And I turned to him and I said, my goodness, you know, I've known you since probably 84, 85. You know, 86 he became the fashion editor of ID magazine. To think that today he's now running Vogue is quite a big deal. Not to mention when I went and visited him in his offices, his PA is black, the head of digital is black. You know, it was just like, it was quite something. So in terms of a cultural point, I mean, you know, I'm just sharing some feelings what I've seen as a shift.
Please go ahead.
In the business. Now we got Virgil at Vuitton, which also is a huge thing.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, I mean, we can't get past the impact of Black Panther as a movie. You know, I know the director well, and in fact, I remember he was after Creed, which was a great successful movie. He was so focused on making Black Panther at the time. I was thinking, you should make Creed 2. You know, forget about this Black Panther. I had no idea what he was going to do with that film.
Absolutely.
And then the way the film was layered was, I think he summed up all our different positions.
Absolutely. So on that note, talking about cultural barriers and social media, I'm going to bounce back and forth. And next question would be to Banky W. The question I have is, how much impact do brand ambassadors have with regards to social outreach? Does a healthy social media following serve more powerfully than that of a traditionally PR marketing firm?
I would say that I think the introduction of social media and the prominence of it has changed kind of advertising and outreach and all of those things entirely, because prior to social media being there, kind of like what Sir Ozwald Boateng said, now with social media, the people that you want to reach are all there. So your Instagram, your Twitter, your Facebook, and so on and so forth. The entire audience that you're looking for as a company or for a message, for a campaign, whatever it is, everybody's there. And so that has changed the game. So while it doesn't kind of put out traditional media entirely, you have to account for social media to get anything across. And so what you'll find is that, like with Nigeria, a lot of kind of activism-related efforts have kind of started or been inspired first on Twitter. So that, you know, a hashtag kind of comes up. So when we did, you know, Occupy Nigeria, when we did Enough is Enough, when we did Lights Up Nigeria, it all started as social media hashtags. But the key, I think, for me is that it cannot end on social media. So while, and that I think is the challenge that we're trying to face now. So, you know, election season is here in Nigeria. Absolutely. And, you know, people are starting to kind of take note of what the governments have done or haven't done and started to kind of point out what is wrong. And when it comes to pointing out what is wrong, our generation seems to be very, very good at that. But the problem is that that activism tends to mostly end online. And INEC, if you're a Nigerian, INEC doesn't count tweets. They don't count your likes on Instagram, you know. So all of that, like, we can have these discussions on social media, you know, and, you know, make ourselves feel like we're part of the change. But are we really playing our role if all it does is just end in retweets and hashtags? So the key is that it has to go beyond social media. Social media is a very powerful tool, but it's not the only tool. So the outreach, the activism, whatever it is you're trying to do, especially when it comes to taking Africa global or moving Africa forward or improving Africa, social media is just one tool. It has to extend beyond that. It has to extend beyond tweeting to real activism. I mean, I sit with young people all the time, right? And, you know, these are people who are very active on Twitter and Instagram, and, when the president said something about young people and you saw social media go crazy. But then you sit with the same young people and say, okay, how many people actually have a voter's card? And most times, I'm lucky if in a room full of young people, 10% of them have ever bothered to register to vote. So, talk is cheap, right? Because we can talk from now till kingdom come. It doesn't change anything unless you move beyond talking about it to doing something. And as a citizen, if you're not even registered to vote, then you're not even part of the conversation. Like, let's forget about who the options are for who to vote for or whatever, but in the very least, get your voter's card. Because when you don't, you make rigging easier. You basically just kind of lay the path down for anybody to do whatever they want. And that's one of my favorite sayings is every country has the leadership that it deserves.
Absolutely.
So in Africa, I personally believe that our problems have been that of bad leadership, failed leadership, corrupt leadership, however you want to term it, but also a problem of citizen apathy. So until the citizens of Africa decide that enough is enough, until the citizens decide that, you know what, I'm going to go out and get my voter's card, because when you don't, then you've made it easy for them to steal your vote or to rig it or whatever. But if all of us show up, we greatly outnumber the people that are corrupt, but we all have to show up. We all have to play our role. And so social media can't be the end.
Please give Mr. Capel a round of applause. These issues are relative across the ecosystem, all of Africa. But now talking on activism, I'm going to move over to Mr. Stein. Now, Mr. Stein is someone who's been behind a huge icon, African icon, who's no longer with us, Fela Anikbola Kuti. He was there, seeing the social empowerment movements through the music, seeing the culture. Oh, Anikbola Fela Kuti. so Fela, Mr. Stein, could you please tell us, just piggybacking or just expanding what Banky talked about with activism and culture, tell us what your thoughts are, your experience is back then and how it's compared to now.
I'll tell you, I've been banging my head against a glass ceiling for 40 years, Strangely, and sometimes I ask myself how, never losing a sense of optimism. I feel that we're going to crack it. And in fact, there are a lot of cracks in that stupid structure these days. It's been hard, in Nigeria, there were 1 million people came to Fela's funeral. But outside, it's, we presented a show on Broadway. But we have to face facts. At that time, a lot of people didn't know Fela from a hole in the wall out there. We were fortunate that Jay-Z and Will Smith came on board, and they put some bucks inside. But more importantly, the poster said, Sean Jay-Z Carter and Will and Jada Pinkett Smith present Fela. So people say, Fela, who's it? But we know those people, let's go check it out. So we played to 500,000 people on Broadway, and then we played to another 500,000 people on tour. But there's only one thing makes a difference in New York as far as Broadway is concerned. Is to win Best Musical at the Tonys. We had 11 nominations, and we lost to a piece of shit called Memphis. It was kind of one of those derivative stories of, a white DJ falls in love with a black singer, and all the songs, you heard them before, you think, or you're not sure. But that's, and the man that had put in the bulk of the money, like $12 million to put that show on, was outraged. He said, I thought the Tonys were to do with excellence in theater, and we lost to that piece of shit. I came out of the theater, and I couldn't find him, so I called him on my phone, and I said, Steve, we're on Broadway, but we're not from there. And that's the bottom line of this. You know, when you go to America, it's all, you know, it's so hermetic. It's very difficult. Let's be real. There is not one single African artist who's cracked it worldwide until today. No, it's true. Is it not true, Michael?
So based on that note, I'm going to expand that question to Michael, because Michael is in the space, and Mr. Stein, I will come back to you.
And
so,
well, let me finish.
Go ahead, sir.
The fact is, there are quite a few artists that are earning a decent living, that are, you know, wandering around doing their thing, touring. They ain't selling much in the way of records, I'll tell you straight. Why? Because Africa is like, in America, Europe, Y-U-R-R-U-P, you know, Europe, oh yeah. And Africa, you know, but we have to remember that half of the population of America thinks the world is 5,000 years old for a start, okay? So we're on a hiding to nothing. My concern is what's happening in Africa. That's what's my concern. We have to get our house in order. I'm saying our, sorry, I was born in Walthamstow, but I've been going there a lot for, you know, I've got a 50-year love affair with that crazy place, you know? We have to get our act together. You know, I remember 40 years ago going to, I wanted to set up an international circuit for the presentation of African music, traditional music and dance, okay? I traveled all over Africa. I hustled my way in to see ministers of culture, and I'd say, you got a football team, how come you haven't got a dance company? And they go, I could see they're looking at, who is this white boy coming in there telling me this? I'd say, no, your mineral resources are ephemeral. You know, one day you ain't gonna have none left. But culture is a living, breathing, ever-evolving entity. That's where you need to nurture. That's where you need to support.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Stein. It's always good to get these insights because we have, you know, lots of, you have a wealth of experience, you and Sir Ozwald, so you might as well tap it right now. So thank you for that. Michael, question I have for you is, you're pioneering Sony music in the Africas, right? And which can be interesting, yet a difficult feat. How do you look at the industry right now? Does Africa have a big engine, a good adoption model for the rest of the world compared to the rest of the world? And what are the cultural barriers to entry you've seen?
It's a serious question. Well, I guess just to clarify, my focus is the West African territory, with a special focus on Nigeria. You know, I'm always very careful about the kind of like Africa conversation, taking into cognizance that we're very different people, you know, across the continent. Sony has existed in South Africa for, you know, 20, 30 years or so, so it's nothing new there. They have a sophisticated music ecosystem, publishing in place and what have you. So, I mean, I think from a cultural perspective, like any business, like any major corporation setting up in Nigeria and West Africa, you know, there's a lot of challenges that you have to face. I still think we're definitely a growing market. When it comes to, you know, world markets, obviously the US is the most important music market in the world, followed by several markets in Europe and what have you. I think Africa still falls, you know, way down the chart. So with regards to actual music consumption, which is where we make our coins, you know, as a major label, you know, we still have a long way to go. And I think that that's from a services perspective. But from a cultural perspective, you know, we love to dance, we make great music. You know, thanks to the likes of, you know, the EMEs of the world, the Chocolate Cities of the world, the Storms of the world, the independent labels that really lay the foundations, the Mohits of the world, that lay the foundation for, you know, this, our industry. You know, it's still, you know, we're still not there. I definitely think there has been a growing adoption for paying for content. Firstly, via the CRBT product, which isn't a real music product in the real sense of the word. We're now in a market where everything is dominated by streaming. I still think, you know, again, you know, we have a long way to go. We have challenges we're facing, not as a record company, but just as an ecosystem. Mobile device penetration is critical because to stream, you need a smartphone. Data is also critical. So, as a continent, the challenges that we face as a music company are the challenges that are just faced on a country, on a macro level. I definitely think there have been, green sprouts, having been in the space almost 10 years, coming from when YouTube didn't exist in Nigeria, Apple Music didn't work in Nigeria. Services like Spotify still don't work in Nigeria. We've seen a lot of change. We've seen a lot of people come into that actual ecosystem where they're paying for music on services like Music Plus within MTN. As a label, we are signing talent. We are working with talent. So I think that some of the biggest things we've tried to do has been, okay, fine, as we're working on this local market and developing the infrastructure, partnering with services like MTN, how are we also trying to grow artists internationally? So I think key to that would be signings like Wizkid and Davido, two of the biggest Afropop superstars on the continent. I always have the question, how's the signings going, what's happening? I think that people need to realize that for me, when we actually approach these deals, they were also cultural signings, right? You sign an artist like, I don't know who's a fan of SZA, Khalid, and some of these great US acts, Rag and Bone Man, great UK act. You sign an artist, it's one thing to break an artist, right? It's another thing to break a sound. I still think we're trying to break that sound, which would be, the popular term for this sound would be the Afrobeat sound. So, these signings weren't just about signing artists. These signings were about signing artists and doing our best as a label to break the sound. Now, we've worked on that. We're still working on that. In terms of success from a metrics perspective, yes, we haven't won any Grammys. We haven't gone top 10 on the billboards. We haven't charted in, top 10 in the UK and, several, charting spaces across Europe. But I definitely think that we're seeing the excitement build up. We're seeing the likes of Wizkid and Davido penetrating those markets, collaborating with artists on a more organic level, and putting some foundations in place for the future of the industry. I definitely think that, that being said, not every artist is going to be signed for international exploitation. We still do. I'm still a very local person when it comes to our industry. My interest is the local ecosystem. It took me 3.5 years to sign a deal with MTN for their music streaming service, right? 3.5 years dealing with commercials, technicals, publishing. It was a struggle. So this is literally where we're educating the space. We can't sign off the master recording rights for Beyonce without signing off the publishing rights. But there's no real publishing ecosystem in Nigeria. We had to make sure those rights were signed. From a technical perspective, we're talking about platforms that cater for, feature phone users more than anything, right? How do you build a platform that actually is able to report to us the way an Apple Music or a Spotify can report to us? So we're talking about them, big services, giant services like MTN with 60 million plus subscribers having to upgrade their platform to be able to license content. And then we're talking about things like pricing, right? You can't charge $10 a month. You can't charge $5 a month. You have to be able to set the right price without setting a precedent. Because in other territories where you've licensed Spotify for $10 a month, they'll come and say, well, we also have low-income users.
So send the right price. How do you determine that? Do you have any mentors coming into the space, or are you just making mistakes?
You have to just knock things over. MTN don't release a lot of data. A lot of the telcos, I don't know if anyone's dealt with Nigerian telcos, but they don't release a lot of data. But they have a lot of data, right? They have these intelligence teams that really know what they're doing. So, we were privy to some information that a lot of partners aren't privy to. I've approached MTN from an independent perspective. I've approached MTN as a major label representative, representing some of the most important catalog in the world, with a track catalog stronger than 5 million tracks, right? So the conversation is a little bit different. The access to information is a little bit different. So we had to use some of this information to determine what we thought was fair and what we thought could work within this market to allow us to make money. So we still have a long way to go. Culturally, we're there, but from that music business perspective, which is what our focus is, we're still working on it.
Okay, awesome. Next question I have is about apprenticeship, and this goes to Sir Ozwald. You served under Tommy Nutter, is that correct?
No, I wasn't an apprentice for him. No.
Okay.
He was a tailor I knew on Savile Row. He was very much, maybe I call it more of a mentor than...
Okay,
yeah.
A mentor. So how important is it? Now, we're talking about music here, but we also have boutiques. They're still part of the same creative ecosystem. So one area sort of is transferable to the other area. Now, you have a lot of business owners over here who are going into the space, or they're scaling outside the space to go on the global stage. How is it important for the right library of information or accessible mentor incubator programs for young entrepreneurs?
These questions, huh? Okay, I'm like, wrap my head around that.
You want me to rephrase it?
Yeah, I'm telling you, is it a mentoring? Are you inspiring young people to expand their business?
I'll say mentoring, because we have the content, Davido, WizKid. There's inspiration out there, but mentorship, how important is mentorship? How is it for you, and how is it for the young entrepreneur, scaling in or scaling outside of Africa?
Right, well, I mean, look, obviously it's really important. I mean, like I said, when I started in fashion, there was the mentorship in terms of, from a black perspective, was not allowed. I mean, basically with Muhammad Ali, he seemed to cut across everything. But outside of that, there wasn't a lot out there, you know. So now, I mean, there's so much choice, you know. So I think, and again, I go on about social media. It's just whatever you want to do. There's an example, and there's a form of communication. Now, in terms of how do you grow your business locally and globally, that's another story. But again, I would say it's possible now, which wasn't in my time, that you could create something and sell it to someone in Hong Kong through social media and put the details, and they'll send you information and they can buy. So in terms of barriers, there's no barriers that I can see now. The only question is obviously...
There are no barriers at all.
The barriers are just not there anymore, as from my perspective.
I see.
So I think it's more about then how do you grow your business, and that's all about capital.
Absolutely.
And you know, and I've got quite a big, strong view about that actually. I think there's going to be a bit of a revolution in capital actually, with this whole virtual currencies. And I'm a big believer that the virtual currencies for Africa is a great relationship. And I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for the continent.
So when we talk about opportunities, we talk about joint ventures, partnerships, because in this room here, we have other people who run or aspiring to be, you know, where you are. And, you know, some people want to know, is there any type of advice or framework? And when you talk about opportunities to interface with some of these people may have the capital.
Look, I mean, the moment you choose a creative field, you got to be incredibly passionate about it, because usually in the beginning, it doesn't work out. And you know, it's a classic story that you hear, you know, over and over again. I mean, they look like they made it overnight, but it's not the case, right? So if you're not passionate about it, you don't really love it, then you know, likelihood is it won't work, because it'd be really difficult in the beginning. There are examples where it happens immediately. You know, there's a bit of success, but even to sustain, you know, that requires a sort of love and commitment to bring out another successful album or successful collection. So that would be the one tip.
Okay, thank you. On that, managing painting the realities so that, you know, there's no, like this question is directed to Rikki, Mr. Stein. You've been in the field for a long time. This question is from the audience. How are we balancing the buzz and hype that we're generating from Afrocentric cultural trends with the business of it?
Well, it's still got a long road to hoe. I mean, I don't want to paint too gloomy a picture. You know, the Fella catalog, I spent a decade digitally remastering and putting together, that we then licensed to Universal. We got $1 million that the family very wisely used to build this amazing 2,500 capacity venue, the New Africa Shrine in Lagos. The record company Universal recouped. We then did another deal with where the company of which I'm CEO, Knitting Factory Records. Again, a large chunk of change changed hands, and again, they've recouped. I was checking before I came here, I looked at YouTube, the stats, and in the last month, 1.8 million minutes of music was listened to, which comes to, I think it's 280,000 actual views. But the interesting statistic is average viewing time is 7 minutes, which is in this, when today people have got the attention span of a gnat. 7 minutes is pretty damn good, isn't it? If you don't know how to do something, it's not a crime. But you have to say, I don't know. And then if you've said, I don't know, you want to find out.
Absolutely.
And I see a major block here in that there isn't anywhere for you to go and find out necessarily, This is something that needs to be looked at, and one that I'm badgering government people about in Lagos. I've got a lot of time and respect for Governor O.B.E, Lagos State, who's doing an amazing job. He's put money into Celebration, he's put money into the New Africa Shrine, he's put money into the Kalakuta Museum, he's also put money into the All Africa Music Awards, of which I'm an international advisor. And culture is the thing, but then I look at the problems that young up-and-coming artists are faced with. I run a digital music service called O.B.E Music, and I'm in the process of signing artists all over Africa. Once they sign to us, I put them up on every major platform worldwide. Okay, now they're up there. How do you get people to know that they're up there? This is the difficulty. So a lot of the onus comes back on the artist to use their social media, to nurture and develop their followers, so that people start to pick up on what's available. But we need mentoring. We need to cooperate with each other. I'm talking to quite a few major people in the music industry in Nigeria, which is a country that I kind of tend to focus on. And the word seems to be, we're all going to get together and we have to cooperate with each other. We have to give each other knowledge. We have to, if you know somebody that can help somebody, put them in touch. Don't wait for 10%. Do it.
So how about this? Now, this is a business school, and people are looking at monopolies. So the people here who are looking to go into space and say, I want to cash out. They want to lock the market before anybody else floods the market. What do you say to them? Do you say they're selfish, or what are your thoughts? The floor is yours.
What I'm really happy about, looking at this event, looking at the way that it's put together, you Africa Club people, I don't know if any of you are in the room. Are any of you in the room? Yeah, there's one in the back there. Hurry up and go home, man. With what you've learned here, let's put it into operation. Let's get things happening. All the old crocodiles are about to croak. And there's some new blood coming through. That's what needs to take place. That's what needs to happen. I'm waiting for you. Come on, man. We need to get this thing happening. There's so much energy. There's so much talent. I've signed about, 100 artists in the last 3 months. And the vast majority of them are really gifted, but they've got no resources. Then I contact the chairman of YouTube and I say, send us some cameras now. You've got these units you put in London, in Germany, in America, state-of-the-art studios available to artists. I'm not asking for you to build one like that in Lake, but give us a few cameras. No answer. So we're going to have to figure out how to do it ourselves.
Yeah, and figuring it out, as you're saying, when you talk about new talent, that is also an area where you have 2 executives here. One is a personality, not just an executive.
He's an artist.
He's an artist, and he's dealt with going from the grassroots all the way up to the boardroom. So my question to you, and this is a 2-part question, the other one goes to Michael, Mike, what are the challenges your company, what have you experienced embracing opportunities, acquiring new talent, and does this new talent being acquired mean new streams of repeatable income? And then the second question is distribution and licensing. It is a new market. You're managing artists like, David O, or just young people coming up. They may not understand the business, but you need to find a way to license the music without, we don't have a copyright, an effective intellectual property copyright or anything like that. So that's a two-part question, new talent and monetizing, licensing, and distribution.
I guess I'll go first. Okay. Okay, so challenges in acquiring new talent or new opportunities or new business. So for instance, at EME, we used to be a record label that dabbled in other things. Now we've kind of stopped the record label part of our business and we function as a full-on media agency. So the easiest way for people to understand that is kind of how Jay-Z went from Rockefeller Records to Roc Nation, right? So Rockefeller is a label, Roc Nation is involved in events and advertising and media and all of those things. So that's kind of where we're at now. Now, in terms of challenges, man, I don't know. We don't have enough time to talk about all the challenges.
The main one that people would experience going into that new market.
I would say this. I would say for where we are now and the challenges that we're facing now, do you know that for most of the advertising that you see on, most of the, I should say, quality advertising in terms of like the, you know, the big companies, the big corporates, the big businesses in Nigeria that make a lot of money, most of that advertising, most of that media budget is actually spent in South Africa. And that is because in South Africa, there's a system in place for educating content creators. Nigeria, we know, has been at the forefront of entertainment in Africa for a while. And now it's like not just Nigeria, there's Ghana, there's South African music, there's East Africa with Kenya and all of that. Isn't it sad that in Nigeria we don't have one film school that is, you know, of state of the art or not even world class, but you know, just of a certain level where you're educating this next generation of filmmakers. We don't have one music production school. We don't have one fashion school, despite the fact that we have success stories like Sir Ozwald. We have the Maya Tafos. The suit I'm wearing, Maya Tafo made it, and I try to wear only Nigerian-made suits at this point because we have so many talented designers.
It's a Nigerian-made suit as well.
But we need to understand that we have to get past the point of outliers being successful and making it so that it is a conducive environment for somebody who is talented and creative and passionate. There's a conducive environment for them to learn what they need to learn to create opportunity for themselves, right? Unemployment is a huge issue in Nigeria and in a lot of countries in Africa. How many people can the banking or the oil and gas sectors or the telecom sector hire? It's a finite number. The biggest bank in Nigeria can maybe hire 20,000 people in a country of 200 million. So, you know, we need to be honest with ourselves and see that, you know what, those sectors are going to do what they're going to do, but that's a finite number. There's not so much you can do with that. Now, we need to get to the point where we empower entrepreneurs, because for every artist, there's an ecosystem of employment under that artist. There's the artist, there's the producer, there's the engineer, there's the assistant, there's the manager, there's the legal team, there's the PR, there's the styling, there's the video shoot, there's the photo shoot, there's the DJ. Do you get? So for every one of those success stories, there's a chain of employment that can lead to further employment. And that is what we need to focus on. Nigeria, it is equally exciting and it's equally frustrating at the same time.
Absolutely.
Because you have all of these talented people, you have all of this, all of this excitement and this buzz. But when you really drill into it, this is a country that spends the majority of its budget on recurrent expenditure, on running the government. And you talk about education in the world. From a primary level, Nigeria has the most number of children out of school in the world. In the world, Nigeria. It is you know, how do we talk about the future? How do we talk about moving Africa forward if we're not even educating our young ones? If we're, you know, and that's just the primary level. Now, I'm sorry, it's taking too long.
Yeah,
okay.
So we'll come back. We have let me have a question.
Let me end it. So for me, I think that we need to focus on education and empowerment. We need to find a way to make sure that as a country, we're thinking about the things that matter, the things that invest in the next generation of creatives, the next generation of content producers. I shoot, I direct videos, I direct TV commercials, I'm working on a film. I know the difference when I work with a crew from America or South Africa. And I know that it's not because Nigerians are not talented, it's not because we're not passionate, it's because we just don't have an educational system. So the person who works with the lights has just kind of jumped in, had a passion for it, and is just figuring it out as he goes along.
Yeah, Banky,
as opposed to going to school for it. So education and empowerment. Okay, I'm done.
Please give Banky a round of applause. So we do have, this is not part of the program, but we do have a president aspirant inside over here running for office. We do have someone from Mumbo. I'm not going to point them out. They didn't want to be pointed out. So these questions are very important when people are going and they're putting issues forward, when policies are written that would help boost the educational system and employment. So please give them a round of applause one more time. Michael, question on distribution and licensing, please,
This
and the
guy's
challenges.
a potential aspirant, 2019 or 2023. So, distribution and monetization.
Yes, please. Real quick.
Well, as in, like, you know, for me, I think that, you know, the path to distribution and monetization is still something that's growing, like I said. I think what I would actually like to shift the question more to is about the ecosystem, right? As in, like, in Nigeria right now, like, how do artists generate most of their revenues? Live, right? When it comes to digital, you know, it makes up a small portion of revenue. I think it's not just in Nigeria, it's a global thing. But I think one of the biggest fall downs, one of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest things holding back, you know, real growth within the system is growth of the ecosystem outside of the performing artist, right? I think in a lot of territories, in more sophisticated markets, you have producers who are well paid, you know, who are actually collecting royalties from publishing or what have you. You have songwriters, you know, you have massive agencies, you know, Warner Chappelle, you know, Sony TV, who actually have these banks of songwriters that, you know, exist under them. I think in Nigeria and Africa in general, that kind of like falls down. You know, I've been in situations where literally an artist, you know, feels that he's paid off a producer almost like work for hire, when really he still owns, you know, something in that composition. I've been in situations where artists, you know, feel they've paid off a songwriter, when realistically they still own, you know, something in that composition. And I want to see a change in that so that distribution and monetization spreads not just, you know, to the artist, but spreads to the wider ecosystem. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face. You know, I'm sure everybody in here has like a potential, you know, like a cousin or a sister or, you know, a friend who's trying to be an artist. And, you know, it shouldn't just be like that. We should have more opportunities. So, you know, definitely in line with what Banky's saying, I completely agree. You know, it's a massive ecosystem. I think the creative space has the ability, you know, to employ massive amounts of people within Nigeria who aren't skilled, you know, who haven't gone to Lagos Business School, not even, let's not go too far to London Business School, who haven't gone to Lagos Business School, you know, who can actually work within it as a camera handler or what have you, or someone just writing songs, you know, as long as they're being remunerated for it. I think we actually need to get there. You know, so it's a slow and steady path. I'm glad to see a lot more publishing companies springing up within Lagos, Nigeria. In the last 3 months, you know, alone, I've heard about 3 that have come up. I've heard about a couple of workshops that are coming up. I'm seeing the young people, you know, actually taking the bull by the horns, you know, trying to make a change. You know, and I think anybody who's in the creative space, you know, I'd encourage you, you know, at any point in time, think about other things outside of, you know, the typical, I need to have an artist that I work with that blows. You know, maybe you need to have a songwriter, a producer, a videographer. I mean, there's a lot of talent within this realm, so people who know a lot of talented people. And I think if we create more opportunities, monetization opportunities for the wider ecosystem, a lot more people would eat. And I think that's something that's important.
Good. Thank you, Michael. So we have very little time. There are questions coming in from the floor, and some of these questions have been voted consensus for what they would like me to ask the panelists. So this question was posed to Banky W and Sir Ozwald, but it's applicable to whoever you guys want to delegate this to. So it's, why do you believe that we still struggle to monetize the growing popularity of our culture? I think it has been answered, but just in a...
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Okay, my apologies.
Actually, I got a bit of a view on this. I think that's actually going to change. Mainly because, again, the success of Black Panther. I know personally, a few of my friends who are big producers in Hollywood are now desperately looking for content about Africa because of the success of it. So the commercial success of Black Panther has made it really clear now that there's a real, there's an audience for this type of movie that kind of shares the culture of the world. So my view is very different.
If I can piggyback off of what Sir Ozwald said, I think that there are signs that, in other words, okay, so Black Panther is one, right? Wedding Party came along. Shout out Wedding Party. Yeah, my people. Okay. No, but what that did was it showed that you could make a Nigerian movie in Nigeria with the Nigerian cast and a Nigerian story, and it does tremendously well. So it broke all of the records for cinema in Nigeria, and I'm tempted to say in Africa, but don't quote me.
Yeah, on that note, I wanted to say thank you. We've run out of time.
Jesus.
Okay, just
shuts me off like that.
You can't stop now.
I'm getting pressure from
it's okay.
I'm getting the flag. But please go ahead, Banky, finish. No, finish that note. We've broken
records.
records.
Remove the thoughts from my mind. Don't worry. Just continue.
I beg no vex. But I wanted to say, give these gentlemen a round of applause. Yes. We have 4 juggernauts on the stage. It's really, really, you need a lot of patience. There's a lot of knowledge here on the stage. But thank you for allowing me to be your moderator. Please, if you see them outside and you have a personal idea or question, their assistants are walking around. Please reach out to them. And thank you very much.